Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of Bluegrass. You've enjoyed live Bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hampton, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite Bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. So my guest today on Got Grass is Bryan Sutton. Welcome, Bryan, to Got Grass.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. Good to talk to you.
I always start this by asking people how you would spend your day if you had nothing on your agenda and no guitar, banjo, mandolin in sight.
I would more than likely go play golf. I might call Jason Carter, who's kind of a partner in golf crime. We tend to try to get out and play golf as much as we can. And that would be top of the list if there wasn't something else that pressing around the house to do.
Yeah. He was one of the people I interviewed, and he did mention he liked to play golf with you. So
yeah. Yeah, we've been trying for a lot of years now.
Trying to play golf. Everybody knows you listening to this, I'm sure, but could you do a quick introduction of yourself, just a little short bio for anybody that might not know your story? Would you mind?
Well, okay. Yeah, I grew up in Western North Carolina around the town of Asheville, and I was fortunate to grow up in a family that would be considered extremely musical. My grandfather was a fiddler, and my dad played banjo and guitar and all kinds of stuff. My mother wasn't involved in the music scene around Asheville that I would grow up in, but she played piano and a good singer and very encouraging as far as the work that I did as a kid to learn the guitar and take piano lessons. And so having that core was really important to me, again, as I would then grow up in a musical community around Asheville, just even outside the family, had tons of folks that were twice my age and folks that were my age to play music with. And certainly, you know, in the summertime, there might be 3 or 4 times a week for jam sessions and gatherings and one thing or another. So music was a huge part of my growing up, and it was bluegrass music and also, old time mountain music. There's a distinction there, ballad singing, clog square dance music. And then my dad was always a fan of people like Jimmy Rogers and blues playing, and I studied classical and jazz music as a kid, teenager. So I was just totally immersed, and that sort of set in motion basically what was pretty clear to me as at a 16, 17-year-old kind of outlook on life, which is like, I just want to figure out how to keep doing this. And again, fortunate to grow up in an area of the world where there were recording studios and musicians that I could meet with and study outside of the bluegrass realm. And these folks were playing country music and gospel music and doing things in the studio that I hadn't done before. And again, just had all that right near me and pursued all that, and eventually started doing that kind of work, and then moved to Nashville in the early 1990s and have been here ever since, and building a career as a kind of still doing both things, playing bluegrass guitar and then also spending a lot of time in Nashville as a studio musician, playing and producing.
Do you live in North Carolina still, or do you live in Nashville?
No, my family's all still there, and my wife, we went to high school together, and I moved here in 93, and then we got married in 96, and she's lived here. We've lived here since then, so I'm in Nashville, but get back to Asheville as much as I can. The camp that I host every year is just outside of Asheville, so that's been a nice opportunity to kind of get back there and have another reason to be around the mountains.
Yeah, that's a town on my bucket list for sure. I can even get my wife to go there, I think.
Yeah,
she sometimes gets a little nervous about too much bluegrass, but
there's plenty to do there.
Yeah. So you heard a lot of music growing up. Do you have any major memory of your first music that you really just locked into, and as a kid, anything specific, or is it just everywhere music?
Yeah, I mean, it was a ubiquitous thing. I mean, it was kind of sundown to sun up, literally. When I would go hang out at my grandparents' house, my grandfather would generally be playing the fiddle or working on a fiddle. He was one of these guys that kind of learned to build instruments and repair instruments, and he had a shop in his basement, and a lot of memories of just being around him and playing tunes. And then it was literally everywhere. I mean, just early memories of me being probably 3 to 5 years old of, just hanging around the house and listening to my dad's band practice and sitting on the floor with a little plastic guitar, strumming along. There's pictures of me standing on stage with them, um, and memories of seeing them play out. Um, I mean, yeah, it's hard to overstate that. It was literally everywhere for me.
There was no doubt ever in your mind that you were going to play music. I mean, that was your love and your surroundings and your culture right from kid on.
Yeah, and it was interesting to at that point where what I just did or my family just did is, I don't want to call it even a hobby, but just, active involvement in this community. When I recognized, again, like at 16, 17 years old, that I could do this for a living, maybe, what does it take to make a living? I was looking at people that were heroes of mine, like Jerry Douglas and Sam Bush and Mark O'Connor, and seeing them play on records, and also seeing them live, and kind of constructing in my head, like, okay, there is a career path if I want to keep doing this for real, for a living, and not just something on the side. Um, that's when all that started kind of forming.
Mhm. Did you have a strong background in the church and gospel music growing up? Was that a big part of your family life or?
I mean, we went to church and we were involved in our church. The gospel music side of things wasn't a big part of
Mm.
my specific growing up, but that area of the world, there were two main kind of national touring acts based out of there that I was aware of, and then the studios that I would go hang out eventually once I got to high school. That's primarily what they were doing. Groups like that, kind of gospel groups of local or national kind of renowned would come there and record. Um, but as far as my specific music, uh, as a kid, we weren't really into that scene so much.
Yeah. I remember reading and hearing about Sam Cooke, the great soul singer who grew up in gospel in the church. And then when he started doing pop music, there was this incredible reaction against it in the church. Like, you can't do that. That's heresy. And they wanted to cut him off. And obviously, he became a huge star. But do you think do you think that's an issue in bluegrass music, getting away from the church, or do you see bluegrass still kind of having that strong connection to that background of gospel and religion? I know a lot of the younger bands up here, especially, don't really seem connected that much to different culture.
I think, well, to speak to the culture, I think broadly, it was fairly common, certainly in the Southeast and where I grew up in the mountains, Southern Appalachia, where church was a big part of communities, as was getting together socially and the classic old barn dance, and any kind of musical gathering that would be more about fiddle tunes. And there wasn't so much a distinction. I mean, I don't think that bluegrass songs or early country tunes were played in church, but I just think that a lot of people did a lot of both, and the lines weren't so distinct. And usually, when it gets into those more distinctive lines, or when you get more uh, kind of dogmatic with one thing or another, where somebody feels like they have a message to bring, and that's a gospel message, and they will not do anything about gospel music, and so secular music's off the table. Again, thankfully, I didn't grow up in that kind of mindset, and don't agree with that necessarily, but I think from the roots of bluegrass, when you had people like Bill Monroe just as eager to sing Blue Moon of Kentucky as, what would you give in exchange for your soul? Both could exist. Two things could be true.
Right. Sometimes it's hard to believe that in today's modern culture. You can think two things at the same time. You either
Yeah,
one or the other.
we're encouraged to find a very stark lane and commit.
Yeah. So your path to where you are today in bluegrass and music, would you call it pretty much just hard work and determination, or was there a big lucky break for you along the way that really pointed you? or
I mean,
both?
maybe some of both. Yeah. I mean, if it's considering two things can be true, I mean, I feel fortunate to have grown up in the scene that I had as a kid, and I did love it. And I have a feeling that if I didn't love it, that my parents would have been okay. Well, you're not forcing this upon you. So I didn't grow up in one of these households where, with a kid with talent, and suddenly I was being, showcased around. I got to make my own choices and realize that I did want to do it and was encouraged to do it. So that all feels very, very fortunate as far as uh, just the opportunities that I had. Then the hard work side was recognizing that um, I couldn't just be a flat picker and go join these or expect to be a studio musician. So, there were various points where, like I wanted to learn a little more jazz, a little more on the guitar other than just fiddle tunes and bluegrass, and some studying classical and jazz. And then again, moving into more of a studio career meant learning how to do different things on the guitar and learning other instruments. And that did involve a lot of hard work. And continued sort of, career development too, that I've always tried to be kind of mindful of, and not just feel like I'm just haphazardly flying around, um, and trying to be purposeful and mindful about what I do, and having goals for how I want to have my, how I want to live my life, that kind of stuff. So that's the combination, to speak broadly about the whole thing, from just the opportunities that I've had since I was a kid to the work that I know that I've done to be where I am today.
Yeah. Do you think it's still possible to develop a career the way you did, or do you think the business has changed and made it maybe more difficult to kind of work your way up, go to the studio, hang out, get it, get recognized? Is it still the same, do you think, or?
It still happens. It's hard for me to know, as far as my specific path. I think that, like, I can think of younger players, like a guy that I see right now, Seth Taylor, fantastic picker, doing some of the same things that I did. He grew up in a similar part of the country as me, and you know, started playing in some bluegrass bands and is doing more sessions around Nashville, and doing more kind of high profile gigs as well. And I don't know how old he is. He's probably in his 20s. So maybe half my age. And so it's neat to see that. And I think, at least I would like to think that there's some version of that where, within the music business, and especially with bluegrass, as accessible as it all is, and it is kind of a small world, where a player with the right kind of facility and attitude, somebody like me is probably going to get to know about that person eventually. You have these young folks like Wyatt Ellis, or and again, I've been able to see some really great young players come up through the camp over the last few years that I've been holding or hosting in North Carolina. And again, we're aware of these people, and inevitably, and this is what happened with me, is that somebody will know somebody else that's looking for a guitar player, and then that, oh yeah, there's this young person just moved to Nashville, or somebody's moving in a year and they could use a gig. And that's kind of the way that continues to work. The word of mouth, the sort of career building and being part of the bluegrass community. I think that part of it still is good and strong. For people that, again, I think there's still a sacrifice, and you got to pay some dues and probably spend some time uh hustling more than you want to, and that's the work of it. But all that to say, I do think that there is some version of it. To the Nashville point, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that again. I feel like the as far as the studio musician side of things in Nashville, uh there are less studios and less studio bands these days because of so much music that's created, at least on a computer. And I think it does affect what a person can do moving to town right now.
I guess that brings up the question of how you got. I know you started working with Ricky Skaggs at some point, and that was a big break for you, I guess, right? How
Yeah,
did that happen? Was it you just heard, wow, there's this guitar player you might want to listen to, and he called you, or?
it was exactly what I just said. The bass player Mark Fain and I had actually done some sessions together in, again, these sort of gospel music centered studios. And by now, I'd, not just Asheville, but driving around to Knoxville, Tennessee, up into West Virginia and South Carolina and Georgia. There was kind of a whole network of studios where folks would work, and Mark and I would oftentimes drive to these sessions. And and he's since built a fantastic career for himself as a bass player and producer. And but anyway, the point is that he got the job with Ricky, back in April of 1995, and then the person that I ended up replacing quit in late June of 95. And that was, the break of it was the fact that this person left kind of suddenly. And Mark said, "Oh, there's this dude, Bryan, that's, he's probably not doing anything this summer." So, just a couple weeks later, I was meeting with Ricky, playing through tunes, and then I was on the road.
Nice. This question I ask people, it might be a tough one, but looking back, what advice would you give your younger self if you
Yeah.
could sit yourself down, 40 years ago and say, I wouldn't do this, or maybe look out for that?
I mean, the things, if I'm fortunate to have had a lot of things go a good way for me, as far as what I would tell a younger self, it would be more of the sort of lessons of um, kind of believing in yourself more. Um, it's hard to articulate exactly, but more of that continued. Well, I'm not sure how to say this. Be the best person you can be. That has served me well. Recognizing especially in the session side of things and any kind of side person work, is that you're there to be on the team. It's not about you. um Anything else to get, to the heart of the matter would be certain things to look out for and be aware of are things like imposter syndrome, where you have these thoughts as a young professional, like, am I good enough? I'm probably not good enough. I wonder who they couldn't get, so they had to hire me. um, that's kind of the negative thinking it's hard to avoid, especially as a young player like me. I was sort of like thrust into certain scenes that, playing with people that I'd grown up around, and it was a lot to kind of take in. And I think my situation may be a little more unique that way, but I think everybody, because I've talked to a lot of players, young and old, that have sort of experienced that in one way or another. Or just a doubt in yourself when it comes to this kind of work, where it feels like everything you play is kind of attached to, if I do this right, I'll get hired again. And this kind of work, this kind of work is so potentially temporary. And it's true. It's like, when it rains, it pours. And, when you're working so much, you want to break, and then you're not working, and you wish you were working more. And learning to say no, all those kind of things are lessons that, or concepts that, outside of just learning to be your best self and be a good player and a good team member, those are things that I think all deal with.
Yeah.
And just, yeah. So the main advice is be on the lookout. Don't let that stuff be a surprise to you, because it is real.
Yeah. That's a good answer. Thank you. So do you have a favorite memory of working with the Dixie Chicks, which were my favorite all-time country band? I just
Ah,
always loved them.
um, we did that record in Austin. That was always a great thing, to get out of Nashville and go hang out and feel like you're kind of embedded as a team, you know, um, in this studio. And a lot of my work, I go in at 10 o'clock, and we have kind of an assignment that we got to get done by 1 o'clock. And that was just a great time to just kind of hang out and just be a band in the studio. They were very open to whatever I would say, or Adam Steffi or Thiele came in, and because they wanted what I could bring beyond just guitar and just thoughts about arrangements and things like that. And just that collaborative. That's always been the thing that I've loved about my situation, is the opportunity to collaborate with people. I've always said I would much rather work with people than for people. And even though they're paying me to be there, it's the spirit of collaboration and the spirit of um, that we're all here to kind of make this thing happen. And it does feel like a team. And that's we had that in a big way. And so you just sit around and you talk about stupid, silly things. You get serious with the music, and eat dinner and hang out. And it was just that whole experience of making that home record was like that for me.
I know you've toured with Tim O'Brien because you guys played here. I think it was 2010 as a duo. Um, that was the biggest crowd we ever had at Guitar Town, believe it or not, was when you
Oh,
two
good.
guys played. Yeah. Um, could you describe briefly playing with Tim O'Brien, what that's like? It seemed pretty great in all respects, but I can't tell as a listener. Maybe
Yeah.
there were things. Yeah.
What I remember about first being around Tim, because my mother and dad were huge Hot Rise fans, and we had all their cassette tapes and all the cars that we had, and saw them live a little bit back in the late '80s, and so I was, kind of, well, not kind of, but very much a fanboy around him. But just being able to get inside his songs, the thing I notice about him as a songwriter that's been the biggest lesson for me is there's a certain inevitability about the things that he writes. It's not necessarily common and so simplistic, but it's still a strength of songwriting to where you just know, like, oh, here's where you go with this chord, or here's where this thing falls. It's in the lyric, it's in the phrasing, it's in the structure, and there's just I think they call that, in the writing, like there's no wasted words. Um, and musically speaking, that means somebody like me coming in to learn a song for the first time. I want to say it feels easy to learn a Tim O'Brien song, even though it doesn't sound easy. Again, it's not just so simplistic, and it may have lots of sort of harmonic or rhythmic depth to it, but there's, again, yeah, an inevitability about his music that is so strong and so consistent across most of what he writes. That's been the biggest impact for Tim, or
Mm.
one of the bigger impacts, as far as Tim on me, is just as a composer and just the way those songs feel. Certain songs you can play that are not as strongly written or almost harder to play because you feel like you're trying to figure it out or chase it around. And his songs just kind of lay out as though they were always there and you've always known them. It's an amazing, it's an amazing thing.
So that's an interesting way of putting it, because I kind of feel that same way about it. The songs are just so logical and they sound so simple, and they just go where they go, and it just makes total sense. A lot of songs you have to kind of think about and figure out, and what is he trying to say? But there
Yeah.
really is none of that in his songs. It's just right out there,
Yeah,
simple.
but he's not playing or writing to some sort of lowest common denominator, uh, kind of concept either. It's deep,
Right.
it's poetic, and it's harmonically and rhythmically rich. But that's the sweet spot, and I've always been a fan of that kind of songwriting.
Hmm. Any chance you guys might play together again, tour together again, or is that kind of a phase that's come and gone, do you think?
It's hard to say. I mean, I would certainly love the idea of doing anything with him. I feel like our particular career paths right now are a little more apart than they are together. Um, but it's, especially at this point in the in my experience, it's I've learned to not try, at least try not to assume too much about anything, because I may get a call as soon as we hope hang up this
Right.
interview here, and who knows what's on the other side of that.
He seems pretty happy singing with Jan. I mean, I think that really filled a void in his career. I don't think he really liked playing by himself all the time. And I think those two, she's learned a lot playing with him, and I think they seem like a happy and good music couple to me.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, it's the point you're bringing up is interesting too, where like a lot of us have such a band centric kind of sense of self, and I know Tim, his early parts of his career were Ophelia String Band and certainly Hot Rise, and then his future bands, and then kind of morphing into solo work, which is uh, he certainly mastered all that too. But there's always something about being in a band that just sort of feels right, and I see him thrive in any situation. But it's nice to know that he's just continuing whatever feels best to him. I mean, I'm just always going to be enough of a fan to hear new Tim O'Brien music in however the form, and just happy to see him still engaged.
Yeah. Somewhere along the line, I think you made a transition from somebody who didn't sing all that much to someone who sings a lot. Was that out of necessity? Was that due to singing with Tim?
Yeah, well,
like
both
work for you?
things can be true. That'll be our theme for our interview today. You know, being around people like Tim that were singers, and I'd always sung parts, you know, in the bluegrass jam scenes. I would always get in the baritone parts or something like that. Never much of a lead singer, but just again, kind of inspired by him as a songwriter and other people too, um, was a big part of that. And I did sing a lot more, especially in those duet years with him, where I was either singing lead or singing the other part around him. Just more singing. You know, it's a muscle that strengthens the more you use it. So I felt like I was getting better. And it was the same time too where I was just trying to write more. I felt like I was at a point in my career um, where what I would tell myself and other people is like, I feel like I've played everybody's song but mine. And I'd done a little bit of instrumental writing and things like that and feel like I had a little bit of a repertoire personally, but just never quite pushed the buttons on music or a sound that felt like it was me. And also having Tim so close to me also meant I don't want to feel like my goal is to try to be another Tim O'Brien or to sound like him or Tony Rice or Doc Watson or Norman Blake. But within all my efforts to try to sing, write more, and just feel more connected to something original, where the original part was a that was the target. Like, so I took vocal lessons to like, okay, let me learn how to be the most honest, you know, or find the most honest sound that's me and not me trying to, you know, sound like Tim O'Brien or somebody else. Cause, you know, you can hear singers doing that are so influenced by somebody and they can't get away from that. I really did want to try to find what it is that I really sound like. And then same with writing where I just wanted to risk and just write stuff that felt honest to me. And again, Tim, I think as a total inspiration, a guy like Tim or Daryl Scott, people like that, you know, that's what they do. So the point was to try to find my version of all that.
Yeah, find your voice. Are you somebody who likes the recorded sound of your voice? I know I've talked to people that say, no, I hate it. I just want to redo it over and over. And sometimes they'll just say, no, that's good. And other people say, yeah, I'm fine. I love it. I don't care. Uh,
I've learned to accept it. And you know, it's always kind of weird because you hear every little what you would call an imperfection or whatever, however it manifests itself. But I've certainly gotten used to it. I think again, part of my journey in all this is kind of an acceptance in one way or another, and you know, for better or for worse, for worse. And I'm not going to say that I love the sound of anything that I do, my guitar or my singing voice, but I've learned in my journey to try to accept that and any kind of effort to force something that's not that or to feel like I've got to continue to kind of work and well, not work, but just get in my head so much about it that I lose something honest. I think that's the key thing for people that feel like they've got to like they can't trust it, they can't accept it. Is like there's something always wrong with it, and that's not necessarily the case. And again, I think for me, it's just trying to find that commitment to whatever it is. It feels honest, and the more honest and fun it feels, the better it sounds a lot of times, versus overthought, overwrought, forced. Um, you know, because I can certainly go down that path, and I don't want to do that.
yeah. I mean, I guess to some, maybe sum it up. I think whatever, in my opinion, whatever sounds the most natural in music is usually the best. And you can usually tell when people are just letting it out naturally or trying to, as you say, sound like somebody else or play like somebody else, and it just loses something in translation to me.
But I think the
Uh,
work is just learning to trust more and more what it is you do. Again, it is what you do. You have to learn to not necessarily love it, but accept it.
yeah.
And that
Uh,
doesn't say you deny the work that you need to do to sing better in tune or to write better or to play better
mhm.
and reach goals of you know however you set that for yourself. But there's the sweet spot is acceptance.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your relationship with Tony Rice. Do you ever wish you'd been able to spend more time with him? Do you feel like,
Yeah, I mean certainly all those guys that I would just still love to the thought that I could even call him on the phone or go hang out with him. And same would be said for Doc Watson, and not that, just because Doc and Tony are not here more, but even Norman Blake. We talk about Norman Blake oftentimes. I'm like, I should just call him up and say, hey. And it's one of those things where you need to, but you never do. But yeah, with Tony, I was very fortunate to have the moments that I had with him, and I felt like I had a connection to him as much as could be, and it's one of those things where I'm totally happy with what I have, and I could wish for more, but knowing that that's not going to happen, I'm still pretty sort of satisfied with the way things went.
Yeah. Did he ever give you any good advice, or was it more just soaking up who he was and what he was for you?
It was probably more of the soaking up. I tried not to ask him too many questions, I think, and again, I just wanted to kind of just witness, see how he kind of carried himself, and yeah, because I got to be around him again, coming back to that studio in Asheville and a little more of that gospel music industry and the recording. They would have him on oftentimes come in and kind of produce one thing or another, and it was just interesting to just see him then. And again, it's not so much about playing with him, but just hanging out and
Yeah.
having coffee and just trying to be quote unquote normal with Tony Rice. And that was, again, when I think about memories of just sitting by the coffee machine with him, and or like coming back from a lunch break and just talking about guitars, and I remember we came back from one afternoon, and he had the antique there and was just playing it and sitting in a chair playing in the studio, and just, it was, again, nothing groundbreaking or earth shattering, but he just said, man, this thing still sounds so good after all these years. And it was just neat to see that, just him appreciate his playing and the sound of that instrument. And it was just great.
I just interviewed recently Dan Tominski, and I said, did you ever play Tony's guitar? He said, yes. I said, what did you think? He goes, I was very underwhelmed by it, he said.
Yeah.
He said the action was terrible. I couldn't get much sound out of it. I just kind of gave up.
The true mystery is that thing only sounded like that when Tony played. I bet Wyatt would probably be able uh, to get something out of that more than anybody else. But my little story about that, again, continuing like studio experiences with him really early on, that guitar was around the studio, and I was on this session, and John Bowman, who played with Doyle Lawson and Alison Krauss for a little while and is married to Becky Isaacs now. Um, solid player, good singer. And there was another session player, David Johnson, wonderful musician. Anyway, the point is that we all played Tony Rice's guitar, same chair, same mic, same little booth. And then he sat down with it sometime later, and we all sounded like us trying to play a guitar, but that sound, it was like everything got bigger, more resonant, more dynamic, and there was whatever, again, to the mystery of it, of his personal connection to that instrument and his touch. It was just in such agreement with what that guitar could do as far as vibrations and things like that, because it's really what it is. It's a physical connection. And most people can't play that guitar because we are all used to playing guitars with higher action and a stiffer setup, and we dig in a little more. And that wasn't Tony Rice's playing, and certainly not Tony Rice's guitar.
Yeah. I know Pam Rice has been letting other people play the guitar. I saw Josh Williams sitting on a porch swing on Facebook playing it. And it sounded good when he played it, but it didn't sound like the same guitar. And I figured of all people, if he can't bring it out in it, maybe it's impossible.
Well, it's impossible for a lot of reasons. Is that it's not Tony. That was the lesson of those Tone Poems records too. The one that they did where they played a lot of the different instruments. Two guys playing a lot of different instruments, and still, if Tony's playing an OM or a triple O 45 or an archtop with a tailpiece, there's still the attack and the physical connection of Tony Rice, that even when you put, well, like on Manzanita, you put an ovation in his hands and it still sounds like Tony Rice.
In talking to Dan, he said there are certain songs of Tony's, or song he wrote about Tony, that he just can't perform. He said he gets too too much raw emotion. He just can't do it. Are there songs that you do that you ever get choked up thinking about something like that, or is that not your
Yeah,
thing?
there was one that I wrote a couple years or a bunch of years ago now called Hills for the Head. That's all about me going back. Well, it was written from the initial perspective was I got to Telluride one afternoon for the festival there and got into my room and you hear that phrase head for the hills, which is sort of had been in my mind when I left house that morning because you head for the hills and that's a sort of a common phrase. And when I got up there, like Telluride, just such a good a place to be and play music and be around friends and the same kind of thing as far as like when I go to Asheville in that mountain area, it's more, what I get from that kind of environment. So therefore now they're hills for the head. So anyway, that's sort of the the unnecessarily clever part of it. But the lyrical part talks about me going home and my family and people that supported me and kind of the recentering of all that. And that one over the years has sometimes been hard to get out, or I like situations where I'd say I probably would avoid that in this particular show because my mother's in the crowd or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
It's one of the advantages of writing instrumental music too, is that, you can avoid that your voice warbling and cracking up.
gotcha. I'm not really sure how to say this, but even with all the accolades that Tony received, both alive and since he died, I just don't think he's been given his due. I'm not sure. You did a beautiful thing where you talked to a bunch of guitarists over Zoom about Tony. That was just fantastic. But it just seemed like one day he was there and then he was gone. And was there even a funeral or a service for him or anything? It just seemed like he just was, that was it. Dead and gone. And I don't know. It just seemed odd to me.
Yeah, I
How
mean,
it,
the circumstances around his actual death are, and just like him, are kind of forever be a true mystery as far as what happened. I mean, there's a book out now that kind of defines with great detail the scene and all this kind of stuff that, I don't know that we ultimately should know, but it's out there. Um, I mean, professionally, and for a lot of people like me, and I'm not trying to put myself in the same ultimate musical breath because I'm not of that generation, but just around those guys a lot like Jerry and Sam and Bela, who had spent so much time with Tony all these years. And you say he was kind of here and gone, but I think ultimately from about 2013, 14, or whenever that last IBMA performance was, he
yeah.
did kind of disappear. And, there were moments where, if I called, he would call back. And I just got to where I would just send him a text here and there on, just say I'm thinking about you. And, it got to those sort of darker moments where, he wasn't taking people's calls and answering the door if somebody came to try to visit him and that kind of stuff. And again, I
Yeah.
want to assume too much of what anybody like that would have been going through. But anyway, my point is that some of us could view the death of Tony Rice as kind of a passing to hopefully a more peaceful side of existence, outside of this, earthly stuff, and hopefully that he's enjoying a better spot. But yeah, there's still a lot of, I don't want to say mystery or whatever's around, to your point of was there a funeral or memorial service or anything like that? It's hard. Yeah, I don't even know.
I mean, I guess something like what you did was a memorial service for him. I mean, you had everybody come in and talk about that
Yeah.
relationship with him, and that was kind of the best way I think you could really celebrate him.
It felt right to do, and maybe that was the the forethought of that, is knowing that, maybe I don't get another chance to do something like this. I mean, we did a big tribute set at Rocky Grass in 2021, and that was very meaningful and important to do, and I was thrilled to be a part of it. But it just felt like I don't know, just one of those things that kind of felt like the right thing to do, and it all sort of started falling together as far as people being available and willing. Because, the thing is like 3 hours long or something like that. So there are some of those people, that had to sit around and wait for their time to be, on screen or whatever. And just the fact that they were all willing to do that, was really special. And, got a lot of nice comments after it. And I'm glad it's there. I usually post a link to it every year at some point, usually around Christmas, just for anybody that hadn't seen it or would like to remember it, just to know that it's still there and people can still look at it. It's yeah, it's still it hopefully it'll always be there. Just as a little, like a journal entry of Tony Rice has just died, so let's a bunch of us get together and just talk about it.
Yeah. Um, you've won a lot of awards in your career. I'm just curious, how important is an IBMA award or even a Grammy to you, either personally or career-wise? Are those
Yeah.
huge deals, or you minimize them, or how does that affect you?
My version of that is I'm not going to deny that I think they're important. And, if I've been in an award show and my name is read in a list of nominees, your heart races and oh, that's fun. Ultimately, that's not going to define me, hopefully. Um, it's a nicety. It's a gesture of or from people that I'm around that I feel honored that, especially with an IBMA, that that group of people would say, we think you deserve this kind of recognition. That's pretty special. I will never call it otherwise. And they are on display in my house, not necessarily in a hugely obvious place, but they're there, and I am proud of them. And other things that I've been fortunate to receive, for some of my stuff, work here in Nashville through the Academy of Country Music, and the Grammy thing. The most fun about that was just that it was with Doc, and got to share that with him. And I called him up when I learned that we had won that, and he said, "Oh, looks like we fooled him again." And it was, just that was the fun of it, was just sharing a moment with Doc Watson like that. I mean, good grief. And so again, it's a important and special part of what I've been able to experience, but it's not defining me as a human or somebody that's trying to be creative and continue to just do good work. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Could you try to describe the difference, if there is one, between being a good bluegrass guitarist and being a good session player? Is there a huge skill
Oh,
set difference or approach difference to that, or?
I mean, the big difference is just kind of in the language, the bluegrass language and the bluegrass kind of teamwork is what it is, kind of specific to the genre based on as far as the guitar goes, based on the lessons of everybody from Charlie Monroe and Lester Flatt and George Shuffler and Clarence White and Tony Rice and Doc Watson and all the people that have sort of shown us the way, Jimmy Martin, Red Smiley. Um, and so, it gives you a genre-based kind of toolbox uh, to work with, where the session side of things is to the concepts are real similar as far as being a guitar player. It's a different language that I've learned as far as being in more of a commercial country setting, playing like a George Strait kind of song that's more kind of just classic country sounding, where I'm going to use a different guitar or a different thinner pick or something like that, or play rhythm in a different way. And I'm probably not going to take a solo, that kind of stuff. So I think it's understanding that what your lane is and what's your role here. I've always looked at whether it's bluegrass or session playing, and the commonalities there would be like, ultimately I'm a character actor, and at my heart I'm a Southern bluegrass guy. I have a Southern accent, and I grew up around Southern people, and I love bluegrass music and love all things that are kind of connected to bluegrass music, meaning I'm not like some kind of staunch traditionalist, but music that's inspired by traditional music. And so I feel really at home there and can kind of engage with the band, especially as kind of a side person in whatever situation, because I'm so aware of it. And and so that's a character. And the same thing again, I'm maybe didn't grow up as a fan of some of the things that I play on, but I'm able to, through study and understanding and finding sweet spots and being collaborative, I can step into other situations and feel like what I'm offering here is helping this thing move along, even though it's not bluegrass. So that character actor analogy, I think, is apt here, where that's your role, is to kind of really, yeah, disappear into the music that you're playing.
Has your approach to bluegrass guitar playing changed over your career? I mean, in terms of how you think about a solo or how loud or fast you play, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, to that point, like the technical or physical side, I definitely try not to play hard. Thankfully, I can say that I haven't broken a string on stage in years, where in a Skaggs show I might break one or two per set. um, and so learning to kind of manage myself better has been a big part of my growth and evolution over the years, and continues, because it is physical, it's athletic. And so I've learned how to manage tension better, and or at least manage me. Uh, there are good days and bad days still, but I've done a lot of work on that front to help me feel like what I do is more sustainable and repeatable.
Yeah.
And so that's a big one. To the music side, I continue to try to evolve and play solos and play music that is more in the moment, less thought about, more allowed than forced, as far as what comes out of me in any given moment. So that's a certain willingness and a riskiness and a playfulness that a lot of times does come with experience. I think I mean, and me too, as a younger player, we're a little safer, a little more cautious. A lot of times we're a little more fearful. And I can say that, after all these years, I'm a little more trusting of what I feel like I can do in any given moment, and don't try to play the is this right or is this wrong kind of game, and just let be what will be.
Do you have a favorite guitar for bluegrass, like the one that you go back to all the time, or do you switch around depending on the scenario?
For bluegrass, it's going to be this 1936 D28 that I got into about 7 or 8 years ago. And it's, it was sort of the official first time in my playing that I felt like I've got my guitar. I've always felt like I've had a guitar and a really good guitar, but this one feels like there's there's a connection to it that's beyond just me and a box of wood. There's, I've played it so much now, and I know all these little nuances and tolerances about it, and things that I love about it, things that I don't love about it. But I know it. I don't have to guess about anything. It's always there, and so that's been nice to have. But I've, still, there's so many good new guitars being made these days, and it's been fun to see some of those come out. And so, I've gotten a few other things. And certainly when I go to a session, you know, I'm accompanied by a couple of boxes worth of these trunks worth of different kinds of guitars, and because that's a whole other sort of workload there, where I'm not
Yeah.
going to put D28 with the thick pick in a bluegrass style, but a guitar that sounds a little lighter, a little thinner, with a thinner pick, a little brighter, to work with a set of drums and electric guitars.
Yeah. I remember Dan Tominski said, his guitar is pretty, what's the word? Well used looking. I said, do
Yeah.
you ever do anything to it? He says, no, I don't. I change the strings. I don't touch it. I don't clean it. I don't shake it out. I've never touched it. It's
Mhm.
just everything that ever happened to it is still visible on it, which is kind of looks that way.
Yeah. Well, it's a testament to the wood and the craftsmanship that went into, again, I know that there's a lot of good ones out there, but just to really focus on what we generally agree as the sort of golden era for the top end is that 30s Martin uh, style, D28, D18. And they really figured it out, and it's as good as new stuff is. And I mean, it's always going to be new and not old. But the point is that we're still trying to sort of recapture what people were doing 90 years ago with guitar building, and they had great craftsmanship. And my other point was just the the quality of the wood that can take 90 years of beating, and my guitar looks about as bad as Dan's. Here it is. Folks listening can't see that, but you can
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
Been around the block, proverbially,
Around. Yep.
and I love it. And it's part of why it sounds the way it sounds. And I know Dan would say the same thing. And yeah, the guitar doesn't need me to be a better guitar. It's been a good guitar for a long time, whether it has scratches on it or not.
Yeah.
Because of the wood, because of the craftsmanship.
It seems like that those pre-war guitar company guitars they're putting out now are pretty nice. I've
Yeah,
heard a few people
right.
say those.
Yep, I've got a couple of those, and still play, a lot of those bourgeois that I've had for years. And again, it's sort of a golden era again of new guitars, this builders that are just producing things that are of a just not that, even if they're not trying to copy a 30s Martin, they're just really good. And I mean, even the new Martins that are being made right now in the early 21st century are, I mean, some people would say they are as good as what they made in the 1930s. I don't know that I would go there necessarily, but they are as good as anything being made today. Martin oftentimes in their quest for, commercial dominance produced things that weren't exactly, I think, top of the line as far as what a serious player to really want to play. But as a serious player, I just bought a new Martin about a month ago that I'm using in the studio, that I was amazed at how good it was. And it was one of their
Nice.
lower end kind of cheaper guitars. And it just had this, I don't know, just had something.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you go back in your memory bank and think what was the nicest compliment you ever got as a musician? If there's any specific one that just stuck out, I don't know. I mean, you probably got a lot, but is there anything that somebody said to you that really floated your boat at the time? Or
Yeah, well, it wasn't about my guitar playing actually, but there was one Merle Fest where I showed up there and literally just sort of walked backstage, and this guy Jim Rouse, who used to kind of help Doc get around Merle Fest, he came over to me, kind of didn't run, but he was definitely trying to get to me before I got anywhere else, and he said, "Rosalie wants to talk to you, Rosalie Watson." So I said, "Okay." And anyway, the point is that Jim told me that they had gotten this record that I'd played on, and it was a Randy Travis record where he did all these gospel tunes, these old time gospel numbers. And I think the one that I'd played banjo on, played this intro, was The Unclouded Day. And Rosalie wanted me to know that she thought they liked the record, and she thought that banjo playing reminded her of Merle. And that was such a cool thing to hear from her, and Doc too. That was really, really special. I'll never forget that.
yeah,
Doc, I did a little at Merle Fest. There's the main stage, and just to the right, as you're looking at it, is a little cabin stage that they'll put on acts as they're resetting the main stage for the next main stage act. And so I had the cabin stage one of the evenings of that year, and I invited Doc, if he would do it, to come play that with me. So I played Bela Fleck's banjo, and Doc played guitar and sang, and Rosalie watched it, and that was really special.
is that available anywhere on YouTube? I've never heard of that one.
Probably something that happened, yeah, like before YouTube actually kind of became the thing that it is. I wish it was. I have a picture of it.
Nice.
No audio. Maybe Merle
Yeah.
Fett recorded it or something.
Is there anybody in the past history of music that you would have loved to play with but never got the chance? Of
Hmm.
past bluegrass or country? Any special person that you?
I in the past, I think
Somebody past, yeah.
it was Django Reinhardt, or at least just to watch him do what he did in person, and just to play rhythm. I would have enjoyed playing rhythm with Django Reinhardt. That would have been great. Yeah, I would go with that.
That's a good answer. Not what I expected, but I like it. I love that. I grew up listening to jazz, not bluegrass, so I that kind of music just thrills me. So, um, So one of my favorite YouTube videos is, I'm sure you've heard this, but you, Tim O'Brien, Stuart Duncan, and Dennis Crouch playing Gentle on My Mind. That was quite a while ago. I don't know how long ago, 20, 25 years ago. It just seemed like the perfect group and the perfect song at that time. Everything just was gelling. Do you remember how that little recording came about? Was that a live performance at a club or something, or just something that was set up?
Well, this guy, Fred Carpenter, used to own and did for years the violin shop in Nashville. And it was kind of the go-to place for violinists and fiddlers and some of the people that did both to have their instruments worked on, bows rehaired, purchase new instruments. And he had a facility just west of Nashville that had kind of a back room. Uh, and the stage that we're on is incredibly small. I mean, just a tight little, just enough, for four people to stand up there and go. And there's a couple of other concerts filmed there. He put out kind of a DVD series. I think there's one with Jim Van Cleve and maybe even Sarah Watkins or somebody like that. But there's a couple of these out there, kind of all filmed at the violin shop in Nashville. And that was our version with Tim and Stuart and Dennis and I. And we'd done some part of that Tim O'Brien band in various little iterations would have been that foursome, sometimes with Mike Bubb playing bass or um, Casey Dreesen or somebody like that playing fiddle, but some little foursome like that. And then, but my point with all that is that we all kind of knew that material. We knew the feel of the material. It's you're looking at four musicians that are really kind of comfortable with each other and listening with each other. One of the things I remember about listening to more than just that song, but just it seems like I don't know if it's just because I don't know why, but it seems like we played everything really fast, um, faster than I remembered it. Um, but uh, but yeah, that was the scenario. I don't remember much about that specific song other than just what's obviously in the YouTube video. But I remember the series, and I remember it was always a fun thing to play um, anything with those guys.
Um, it just seemed like watching this video that each time one of you took a solo or did something, the other guys were looking over and smiling like, wow, that was pretty good.
Yeah,
There was
that's
a
one.
lot of respect and love on there. It appeared in the video. I mean,
Well, thanks.
it looked
It's
like,
back to again, like the things that thrill me the most about what I get to do are those moments like that where you've got a really good song and you've got a group of people that are going to be listening to each other. And it's not a competition, but you're sort of, egging each other on to not be impressive and flashy, but just be musical and be groovy. I mean, when I play with Dennis, I mean, I could just as soon not play a solo and whatever it is if I'm playing with Dennis, just because it's so fun just to play rhythm with his bass playing. And so you just got these little stacks of elements. Um, and everybody does inspire everybody else and kind of keeps up and dynamically if things shift on a dime, we all go there immediately. And it's at that point it's more like a well-oiled kind of basketball team or a jazz group that's just, in that just in the moment. And that's what I love. Can't get enough of that kind of thing.
yeah. Um, when I interviewed Todd Phillips, we were talking about, bass playing and how his bass playing has changed over the years. And he goes, yeah, I play a lot less notes and I try to play the right notes. And he said, I was once talking to this famous jazz, funk soul bass player, James Jamerson, who said, don't ever mistake a groove for a rut.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice quote that, a nice way of looking at it.
Yeah, we tend to feel like we've got to be including all this complexity and really it's not simple, but simplistic stuff is good. Beautiful music can be simplistic. It can be complex too, but we tend to make it more complex before we give simplicity a chance to be what it can be.
My wife, Diane, didn't want me to ask you this, but she asked me last night at supper. She said, why do all these bluegrass musicians want to be interviewed on your podcast? And I said, I don't really know. I'll ask. So I'm asking you, like, do you just like doing podcasts, talking to people about your life and views, or
Yeah, I love
do you?
talking about me and the check that you're going to send me is so huge. I'll be able to pay off my
Oh, yeah.
daughter's college tuition and yeah, no, I think what we're about whether it's your podcast or other podcasts, it's, this is a new thing. And just the fact that you have always been promoting concerts or giving a space for people like me to play, that's how we know you, and you're a good guy. And again, like I said earlier, bluegrass music is a relatively small community, and people know people, for
Yeah.
better or for worse. And in your case, certainly for the better. And so it's nice to know that in this modern era of what podcasts are, and I find myself listening to a lot of podcasts these days. I'm happy to see you doing what you're doing, and anybody that's willing to kind of say, okay, there's this big, global sort of thing happening with this concept of a podcast. And, maybe there's a space for a bluegrass conversation in it. I think that's one of the good things about something like YouTube as the largest, you know, uh, pile of media ever assembled. It's all there. And, it's nice to know that bluegrass has its spot, just like it's nice to know that there's a bluegrass channel on Sirius XM with all the stuff that you can listen. You can still find the bluegrass thing and go hear a Bill Monroe song. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're a part of that.
Well, thank you. I actually I actually enjoy this more than I do putting on concerts. It's so much easier. I just sit here and talk. I mean, I
Yeah.
never made money at concerts. It was always just because I like to do it. I certainly don't make money at this. I wouldn't even know how to begin, but I just like you play music. You love to play music. Even if you weren't paid, you'd probably still play it. And I feel like I like doing this. So it's
I
a lot
think
of fun
that's
for me.
yeah, and like in any entry point into what is the sort of the business of bluegrass, I think most people are here knowing that. I mean, none of us are going to get rich playing bluegrass music on average. You have occasional little breakouts, thankfully, here and there, but that is not the norm by any stretch. Most people are going to continue to remind themselves of how much they love this music and why they're into it, not so much what they're doing, but just the fact that they're compelled and drawn to be part of this community. Again, whether you're a concert promoter or a podcast host or a picker or a a bus driver or label person or whatever it is, I think it's nice to know that people still care about it enough, because it's not a ultimately, compared to other things, it's not a huge money making endeavor.
Is there anything that people would be surprised to learn about you as I close down here? I always ask this question to people: is anything that about you that people wouldn't know would be surprised to know, or
Um, I don't know. Well, I would say that maybe something that's odd would be that I do really, really enjoy playing and going to see and listening to heavy metal music. I have a daughter who's 20 years old that enjoys it too. And just yesterday, I was playing a set of drums in our basement with her and just going as hard as we could go. That's fun. And I took her for her 18th birthday. We went to see Metallica, and then 2 nights later, Anthrax.
wow.
Uh, and I do enjoy that a whole lot.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's a good answer. I used to listen to Ornette Coleman and people like that when I was, 17, and my friends called it nightmare music. Why do you listen to that stuff? And I couldn't explain why. I just liked it. I don't know. All that
Yeah,
atonal free jazz is just like I loved it.
yeah. There's a certain energy, obviously energy in heavy metal music that maybe not to that degree, but the angst that you hear sometimes in bluegrass and the kind of muscle or the visceral, people really digging into their instruments. It's a similar headspace in heavy metal too.
Yeah. Well, that's a good answer to end this on. It's been the hour went by quickly. Thanks, Bryan, for taking time to talk. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate
And
you.
good luck with all your music. And if you ever come back this way again in any configuration, we're always here. Happy to have a show if you're
Yeah,
so
well, I
inclined.
hope to be. I haven't done a whole lot of touring under my own steam the last little bit, but I
Right.
am I am working on some new music, and I hope to be releasing something, in about a year or so. So I'll keep you posted.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again. I'm going to turn off the recording. We're all done. And
I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.